Hi there, it's Ian here, and you're watching Grumpy Opinions, the show where I'm going to tell you all about what I think of films, TV shows, games, and life in general. Let's get on with the show. His Dark Materials is a BBC show about Lyra heading north to find her heretic father, Lord Asriel, who's been held up there by evil polar bears and stuff. And before we go any further, remember, you can follow me on Twitter at Grumpy Opinions, and it really helps me out if you do. Drop me a little comment there, tell me how you think of the channel, and just have a wee chat with me. And remember to subscribe and press the wee bell icon and all that good stuff. Anyway, episode 7 starts out with bad things happening to Will Parry. You see, Bad Churchman goes to visit his mum again and spooks her out, saying that he's working for the intelligence services, and that they need the letters that her husband left before he died, and that he might not actually be dead. And she's like, no way, and he's like, okay then, for now. But once he's left, he tells his dudes that he wants those letters and he doesn't care how they get them. So they all go in and totally trash the place. And Mum rushes off to meet Will at school because she was upset by meeting Bad Church. And when they get back, they find the place a total tip. So Will takes his mum to the nice gym teacher from a few episodes ago and says, look, can you just look after her for a few days and please don't call the police, because if the police know that she's nuts, I'll be taken into care and she'll be locked up in a home. But later that evening, he's found the letters and he's sitting reading them in his room. But then they didn't get them, so they come back in again, and he's totally gets prepped up, winds a belt round his hand, and he rushes out the Chernobyl guy, and then accidentally knocks him over the balcony, and it looks like he's dead. So then Will's off, and doesn't look like he's going to home again anytime soon. Meanwhile, in Lyra's world, she's alive. She survived falling out of the balloon, and she wakes up in a pile of snow, and she gets captured by a polar bear, but it's not her pal Yorick, and then she gets taken to the polar bear castle. But luckily, after a chat with a slip insanity professor she meets in her cell, she has the wits to go and speak to the king. And she tells him that she's actually a demon. She's the demon of Yorick. And she was created by Mrs. Coulter by an experiment up at Bollivanger. And she says she'd much rather be the demon for the king. But for that to happen, he's got to beat Yorick in single combat. And he's not convinced, and he gets her to prove it by telling him a secret, so she quickly alethiometers the answer, and he's totally on board. So when Yorick arrives, she tells him the plan, and it's straight up fighting time. And the brawl's totally intense, and Yorick gets his ass handed to him. But then, when the king guy goes for Lyra, after he realizes that she's deceived him, Yorick suddenly gets a second wind and beats him. And after that, they meet back up with Roger, who's been hanging out in a cave somewhere for a while for no particularly good reason. Great plan, guys. And then meanwhile, Lee's somewhere else with his crashed balloon, and he thinks that he's lost and failed everybody. But then Serafina pops him down and fills him in on the rest of the plot. And the episode ends with Roger and Lyra getting to Asriel's base, and James McAvoy's all sort of trippy out when she appears, only suddenly to be an awful lot happier when he realises she brought Roger. What could this mean? So what did I think? Well, I think this week's episode was one of the ones I've been really waiting for a few reasons. I mean, the obvious one being that this is the one that had the big polar bear fight. I mean, come on, you've got a story where there's a race of armoured polar bears. You're going to want to see them do cool stuff. And the big showdown for the throne of Svalbard is a total highlight from the book. Now, not only did it look cool, I mean, all of it looked cool. I mean, the castle looked amazing. I love the wee detail of how there's trails of blood coming from the sea to the castle, because I mean, they're polar bears, so they must eat seals, so they must drag them out of the sea all the time. And it was really cool to see the two big guys squaring off. And it was a very different fight from the one in the movie adaptation. Yeah, I'm going to mention that. And granted, I mean, you look at the other one, it's a bit cartoony by today's CGI standards. The lighting looks a bit funny and bright, but the film's actually a bit closer to what happens in the book, and it's really quite grim, especially the big jaw-dropping finale, literally. The BBC one went for a bit more kids-friendly kind of thing and had it all happen off-screen. But yeah, I mean, I also like the fact that we got the payoff of the Will storyline, with him not only getting his mum out of the house and safe with PE Man, I mean, who they'd set him up earlier, but they actually had him using his mediocre boxing skills to attack the guy from Chernobyl. And I like that he didn't actually kill the guy intentionally, because the guy trips on a cat and falls over the balcony. Although I'd love to know what the other dude was doing, because I mean, the house isn't that big, and it seemed to take him an awful long time to just get to that hallway, which is, you would think, was only probably about 4 steps, because I mean, houses in Britain aren't that big. Now, I mean, it was good to see James McAvoy again as well, although this was a little bit pantomime-y if you ask me.
No. No! I did not send for you!
But it's not a bad episode. I also like the fact that it took the story further than the film goes, because the film actually ends with Lyra and Roger on the way to finding Lord Asriel, but they don't actually arrive there. Although interestingly, I think as I mentioned at the beginning of the season, they did actually film right up until the end of the first book, and they finished special effects on some of it as well. But they decided at the last minute to suddenly cut a chunk out of it with them not actually finishing it, which is why they never released an extended cut. but a lot of the footage ended up in that trailer or on like specials and things. But again, I'll talk about that more next week. But also, like, that Lee was kind of cross with himself about having lost Lyra. Although, to be honest, I mean, he'd also lost Yorick and Roger at that point because they apparently fell out the balloon as well. So, by rights, I mean, this guy should be in absolute tears because, I mean, he thinks basically his best mate and two kids have both died because he didn't manage to, like, fight off a bunch of, like, space weevil things. But anyway, as I said, I don't really understand the direction they went with Lee Scoresby. And I think that Sam Elliott was much better in the movie, but then apparently so did Philip Pullman, who said he was just right when they cast him. But yeah, speaking of acting, I mean, I have to be honest, it's a minor gripe, but I think I preferred the voice work of the guys doing the voices of the bears from the film. I know, and I've mentioned the film quite a lot, but I mean, this is one of the big moments in it. And I suppose it's kind of unfair considering, like, they've literally got Gandalf and Blackbeard doing the voices in the film, whereas in this one, it's like some actor guy who I don't really know from anything, and the guy who did the voice of Darth Maul. I mean, you know, the show's still pulling out a bit of that tired old young adult cliche as well, when, you know, kids win because adults, or in this case, like polar bears, are kind of easily confused and thick. And, you know, none of these are big things. But the other thing, as I mentioned before, was the big, oh no, and then, oh, hello, Roger, bit at the end was a little bit too over the top, a little bit too obvious. I mean, anyway, we'll get into that next week. But considering this was basically probably one of the most solid episodes of the show, and I've got very little to say against it, let's keep it short and sweet. So till next time, I've been Ian, and these have been my grumpy opinions.